2 hours, just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free.
Hello everyone and welcome back to this edition of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. I hope you like those two segments showing kind of the dichotomy of a team in the SEC that really wants to start anew, get back to their ways of winning, and a team that has all that history in the SEC, also in kind of transition mode and wanting to maintain their level of success. Let's talk about an SEC team that really just burst onto the national spotlight kind of just last year. And they really are looking to cement themselves as a force to be reckoned with in this conference. And I really believe they have all the pieces set. This is an electrifying team that a lot of people might still be sleeping on right now. But I'm telling you, I'm high on this team. I'm so high on this team that they're my sleeper pick to win the damn SEC. Yes, I said it. Missouri Tigers have arrived. And yes, there's a lot of things that could go wrong here. There's a lot of reasons as to why Missouri could prove to be wrong. But at the end of the day, they maintained a lot of the players and roster that got them here in the first place. And they have perhaps the best wide receiver in all of college football. In terms of their schedule, they're only the 14th most difficult schedule in the entire conference. And because of that, they have a 37.3% chance to make the CFP. And when I look at all the players that they have, the production they have, I'm really excited for them. Let's start off with Brady Cook, their quarterback. When we think about quarterbacks in the SEC, well, Carson Beck, Jalen Milroe, Quentin Ewers. Let me throw Jackson Dart in there as well. We don't necessarily talk about Brady Cook, but you should be. 3,317 yards last year, 21 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. And then, of course, perhaps the best wide receiver that Missouri has ever had, the best wide receiver right now, in my humble opinion, in all of college football, Luther Burden III, 1,212 yards, 9 touchdowns. And I'm not saying that should signify, well, oh, this is an otherworldly team. It does signify that continuity in the SEC matters more than most. Because this is a quote-unquote young SEC. Teams are implementing new quarterbacks. They're implementing new coaches, new ideas. And it's certainly becoming a more fresh league. And Missouri's quote-unquote continuity is certainly something that should be pointed out and acknowledged, because having these two guys here who have that rapport with each other really sets the foot forward for the offense. And we can talk about the pass defense. We can talk about the defensive pieces they lost. They lost Darius Robinson, a huge piece off the edge. But I think that in order for Missouri to really maintain that hype, they needed that offensive production. Now, a lot of people might say, well, you didn't talk about Cody Schrader yet and how he's got a hold on the offense. Well, I think that what stems from that is Cody Schrader was a flash-in-the-pan kind of player. Nobody expected him to have as big a season. Like Ollie Gordon. He was kind of like Ollie Gordon in that regard. But in this new season, if you're the Missouri Tigers, you have to take advantage of the season more than anything. Because this could be Brady Cook's last year. It could be Luther Burden's last year. And you want to set a foundation that the Missouri Tigers, after both of those guys leave, after all they've given you, getting you to this point where now people are starting to talk about you. Now people know about your program. It's going to be very integral. Let's talk about their schedule a little bit. Talk about the 14th easiest schedule. You've got A&M on the road, Alabama on the road, and Oklahoma at home. Those are the only 3 games that I could pinpoint on their schedule that are really tough. So let's break them down. The most even game should perhaps be against Texas A&M. And I'm saying this because if you view both teams, they really, now that Texas A&M fired Jimbo Fisher, should be adapting to the kind of small school mindset. When I think about comparisons to them, let's go to the Big 12 for a second. Texas A&M, I didn't mention this in their little segment, but I think of Texas A&M right now as Kansas State. And I'm not just saying that because Colin Klein is their offensive coordinator. I'm saying that because Connor Wegman, in many regards, kind of reminds me of Will Howard. A very, serviceable guy. Well, Connor Wegman was a 5-star recruit, so you can't describe him with words it's serviceable, but if he's serviceable enough, that should be enough for Texas A&M. And then when I look at Brady Cook on the other side of the coin for Missouri, he also brings that element of serviceability. Just enough to get it done. That's the most even game on their schedule. It's also a game that could be a jockeying game for seeding position. I think that Missouri right now kind of profiles as maybe a 9 to 10 seed in the new look CFP, but that could change. And this game could be the barometer for that. It should be a huge game for that. Then let's talk about Oklahoma at home. And I mean, that game, in many respects, I don't necessarily view as a must-win for Missouri. Because I think that Oklahoma, while I did pick them in terms of the over, aren't necessarily going to be challenging for the CFP at this point. I picked the over, but barely. I think that they're an 8-4 team at best. And I think that there's a little more margin for error for Missouri than there is for Oklahoma, because Oklahoma has a much tougher schedule. In Alabama on the road, that's the game that you really dream about. That's the game you circle on the calendar. If you take down Alabama when they're considered to be a bit weaker, now they don't have Nick Saban coaching, that says a lot of the steps forward that you have taken as a program. So, while there aren't many games to circle on the calendar for Missouri to really target, if you win the Alabama game, that says a lot about you. Let's talk about how this all sets up for the playoff. In my mind's eye, you have all the conference champions, so I'll go through them. SEC. It's easy. I think Georgia wins it ultimately. I'm sorry, but it's Georgia and Texas at the top teams. Texas will probably be the 5 seed. Then we go to the Big Ten. It's a toss-up, but I'll go Ohio State. Then the ACC. I'm going to toss up. I'm going to go Florida State here, just has the most upside. Then I go Big 12. I'm going to pick Kansas State just because I have a lot of trust in that team. They know what they're doing. They've had the experience. The next 5 or so teams should all, outside of a group of 5 teams, who I'm very excited to talk about at the end of today's show, should all come from either the SEC or the Big Ten. So you have, let's say, 4 SEC teams making the playoff, 3 Big Ten, and then potentially the group of 5 team comes in at the 12 seed as the 6th highest ranked conference champion. If Missouri can position themselves somewhere in the 11 to 10 range, you can get a decent game against, say, an Oregon. Maybe if they're decent this year, throw in Washington. Or another SEC school that isn't as tough as, say, a Georgia, an Alabama, or a Texas, say, an Ole Miss. An 11-7 matchup against Ole Miss isn't necessarily something that you'll be panicking about. And I'm telling you, if Missouri sneaks in as a lower seed, and they could have been deserving of a higher one, then they're the scariest team in the entire CFP. I'm sorry. Because for so long, Missouri have been trying to get to this point. For so long, Missouri have tried to get into the national spotlight. Now that they have the players to do so, I truly think that if they have that chip on their shoulder, if they are a lower seed than most of the other teams in the SEC, that is the impetus for them to go on a nice little run here. And I wouldn't be surprised if they get to the semifinal or something in the CFP. I wouldn't. That's how much respect they have for what Eli Drinkwitz, Brady Cook, and Luther Burden have done to this team. Let's talk about a potential CFP matchup. As the 11th seed, depending on, whether or not they go to the CFP or semifinal. You are looking at an 11-7 matchup, I believe. Let's say Ole Miss is that 7 seed. I have a lot of trepidations about picking that game because I think it's going to be the best game if that really does happen. It's going to be a classic shootout. Both of these quarterbacks are guys who feel like they had a chip on their shoulder over the years. And I do think that at the end of the day, Missouri, yes, I would say that right now they might not be on the level of an Ole Miss, but they have potential. And if it's, say, LSU that gets that 7 seed for some reason, then I definitely would pick Missouri in that situation. Then let's go to potential quarterfinal. They are a low seed, but let's say Liberty loses their first game. They'll be the lowest seed. They would face, say, the 1 seed against Georgia, and that's just a crapshoot. These are one-off games now, not, a game where there's so much at stake, where it's a 4-team CFP and it's just a pressure cooker environment to try and get to the championship game. No, there's more margin for error, and it's a team that knows about margin for error. It's Missouri, and if you're telling me that Missouri has a chance in a one-off game to beat Georgia after having a chip on their shoulder, after trying to get to this point, trying to get to the point where they are nationally relevant, then who's to say that they can at least put up a decent fight? There's a lot of issues as well with being this high on Missouri, saying that around the same as Texas A&M, 8.5 wins. But if you take the over, you might be pleasantly surprised here. And taking the over really should be the best bet. You're looking at a schedule where if the only games that are really eye-popping are A&M, Oklahoma, and Alabama, that's much less daunting than Georgia's, much less daunting than Texas's, even though Texas isn't as daunting, much less daunting than A&M's, a little less daunting than Alabama's even. So you if you're Missouri, have to take advantage of this situation, and if you're a bettor, you should consider betting the over on this, because this is a team that's shocking no one no more. And so the hope that I have for Missouri is high, and I hope that you kind of take this to heart and bet on them a little bit more. Let's just about do it for this segment. Coming next, we have our only Big Ten school of the day, a school that really hasn't gotten over their big, massive hump of beating Ohio State and Michigan. That should give away what this team is, but we'll talk about them a little bit more after this quick break.